Welcome back to another video of Barbecue with Barry, and today we are doing some beef short ribs. Let's get started. All right, so I've been looking around for some beef ribs for a little while now to do a cook on these. I was able to find these at Wild Fork, which is kind of like a little meat market in my area. They got a couple different locations. It is, I think, like a franchise or a place with multiple locations. So you might be able to find one near you. But they had great prices on beef ribs, beef short ribs, and a ton of other stuff. I ended up picking up some sausage and a couple steaks and stuff like that as well. But was able to get these. These are USDA prime beef short ribs. The marbling on these looks great. And we're going to be cooking these today on the smoker. We got the recteq fired up to 225 degrees, where we're going to have these for probably 3 to 4 hours. And then we're going to crank it up to 275 for the remainder of the cook to really render that fat and get these super tender. So let's jump into it, get these cut open, and start trimming them. So these were right around almost 5 pounds, 4 3/4 pounds. They are prime. You can see really, really nice marbling in here. They were only like $1 or $2 more per pound for the prime compared to the regular choice. These looked a lot better, so I went with these. I think they came out to like $53, right around there, and it is the traditional 3-bone short rib. So let's go ahead and get these patted dry. All right, so for trimming these, I just want to go ahead and take some of this really heavy fat off the top. There's not much, honestly, to trim off of here, but I do want to just take a little bit off, but leave some because obviously fat is flavor, and we want that to render down nicely. Now, beef ribs do have a membrane on the back similar to pork ribs, but beef ribs, usually you want to leave the membrane on there just because it helps keep those ribs together, because once we cook these, they're really going to shrink up onto the bone. Kind of like how you see that pull back with pork ribs. Beef ribs really pull back, and that membrane just kind of keeps everything together so that they don't fall apart. So now that we got these trimmed up a little bit, we're going to go ahead and get these seasoned up. I'm going to start on the bone side. And we're just going to be using a little bit of W sauce for the binder today. Then we're going to start with our 16 mesh coarse black pepper. And then we're going to follow it up with Meat Church Gospel. Now, what's nice about beef ribs too is because they have that bone in there, it kind of helps insulate the meat, and that heat travels up through the meat and just really makes them very tender. I've never cooked them, removed the bones and cooked them without it before, but I have heard that it makes it's a lot different taste and a lot different end result. This is a big piece of meat, so it can take a good amount of seasoning. It's not going to hurt it. Just go ahead and pat that in. All right, these are looking really good. We're going to go ahead and let these sweat in a little bit, and then we'll put them on the smoker at 225 degrees. Now, just like most things in barbecue, we're going to be cooking these until they are probe tender. Could be 200 degrees, 203, 205. Even a little bit higher, as far as like 210. But we want to make sure that probe's just going in just like butter. And when we poke it, almost feels like our finger's just going to go right through the meat, but there's still nice and sturdy on the bones. This cook is probably going to be right around 8-9 hours. So make sure if you're doing this, make sure you allot enough time for that. Obviously, it can change depending on the temperature that you're cooking at. If you want to run them a little bit hotter, you can do that. If you want to run them, I've seen people run them almost like a cold smoke at like 185, 200 degrees for the first couple hours to really get a lot of smoke on there, and then crank it up to 250 to 275 degrees for kind of the second half of the cook to really get that fat render. But it's all up to you as far as like how you want to cook these. Like I said, I'm going to start these at 225 degrees, so it's a little bit lower temperature, not very super low, and we're not starting off kind of hot at 275 or 300 degrees. So we will crank it up later, but we really want to take the beginning of this cook to get as much smoke onto these as possible. All right, it is a nice chilly day here in Florida, right around 45 degrees. I know probably up north that's not cold, but down here in Florida that's cold. Some of our friends up in the Panhandle actually just had some snow earlier this week, and there was snow on the beaches in Florida, which is kind of crazy. But we got our beef ribs all seasoned up. We're going to go ahead, get these on. The smoker's running at 225 degrees. Go ahead, get these on, and I'm going to throw a probe in them just so we can monitor the cook. All right, they are on and ready to go. We got our ThermoWorks thermometer in there. Currently, they're sitting at 56 degrees. So we're just going to let this thing go and come back and check on them in a couple hours. All right, so I just checked the clock. Our ribs have been cooking at 225 degrees for right around 3 hours and 45 minutes, almost at that 4-hour mark. Our probe is reading at 158 degrees. I'm just going to go ahead, take a look at these and see how we're coming along. Looking really good, getting some really good color on there. Got that good bark starting to form on there. Sitting right in the 150, 160 range. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead, crank this thing up to 275 degrees to really start rendering that fat. All right, so our beef ribs have been on right around 7 hours. First couple hours, first 3.5, 4 hours, we were sitting right at 225 degrees. Then after that 4-hour mark, we bumped it up to 275 degrees, where it's been for the last 3 hours. Let's go ahead and take a peek and see how these look. Probing really, really nice. Looking awesome. Sitting right around 195, 200 degrees. That probe's just going in like butter. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these off, wrap these up in foil, and let them rest. All right, now that our beef ribs are done cooking, I mean, this top is just like a pillow. You can see the fat coming out here when I press on these. Let's go ahead, get these things wrapped up with some tallow and let them rest down to like 140, 150 degrees for slicing. This is some homemade tallow. Really good thing to make with your extra fat that you trim off of a brisket or whatever. Just put that fat onto the smoker. I'll do a video on that someday, but the brisket fat that you trim off, put it on the smoker with the brisket and let it render down, filter it out, and then you got homemade beef tallow. All right, now that we got these nice and wrapped up, we're going to let these rest and come down to temperature, let those muscles in the meat relax. And then once it gets down to 140 degrees, we'll slice them up and see how we did. All right, so our beef ribs have been resting in the foil wrap with a little bit of tallow for right around an hour now. They've come down in temperature quite a bit. So let's go ahead, slice into these and see how we did. All right, these things look and smell absolutely incredible. So let's go ahead. Look at that. Super juicy. Got the fat rendered all in there. All right, only one thing left to do. Let's go ahead, dive in, and see how we did. Oh my gosh. Super tender. So juicy. Really taste that pepper in the 16 mesh black pepper that we put on there for our rub. I mean, just look at that thing. That is truly the best bite in barbecue. I don't think I've ever had anything like that before. That is so good. Wow. All right, so let's do a little recap of our cook here today. So we did a light trim on these beef ribs, rubbed them down with some W sauce. Then we went on with 16 mesh coarse black pepper and then topped it with the Meat Church Gospel rub. Let that adhere. Put those on the smoker at 225 degrees for right around 4 hours. After that 4-hour mark, we bumped it up to 275 where they continued to cook for another 3 hours. So our total cook time was right around 7 hours. And these things were probing perfectly tender, right around 200 degrees. We took them off, wrapped them up in foil, let them rest for right around an hour, then sliced into them, and this was the result. Thanks everybody for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.